G'day everyone, how are we doing for a Monday night? Tonight we're going to be talking about valuations. So if you've got any questions or any comments, just leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best at the end to get onto them and answer them for you. But tonight we're going to be discussing the difference between bank, council and agents appraisals. And that is they all approach things differently, and they've all got different reasons why we use them and why they're around. So, and just a bit of a caveat, agents don't do a valuation as such. They only do an appraisal, but I'll get onto that a bit later. So for the banks, look, for those that don't know, I'm actually a qualified property valuer. I do a lot of work for the banks and whatnot. They're one of my biggest payroll clients are banks. And to become a qualified valuer, I've done 3 years of university. I then did 2 years of on-the-job training, so sort of 5 years all up. And then I've sort of also completed over 10,000 valuations over quite a few years. And that's ranged from everything from blocks of land and properties only worth tens of thousands, all the way through to properties worth over $2 million. So, and that's all been in sort of country Victoria, southern New South Wales, and also down in Tasmania. I've been lucky enough to do some work down there. So, now a big thing that is bandied around in property circles is bank valuers always undervalue property. I hear it time and time again. Why would you undervalue a property? Things like that. Banks only want you to do fire sale prices. Hear it a lot. The big thing is we don't actually undervalue property. The banks have certain requirements on which we have to abide by, and that is that the property has to be able to be sold within 3 to 6 months at the price that we determine is market value. Now, at the moment, 3 to 6 months is an extremely long time for a property to be on the market. We're seeing some properties sell within 24, 48 hours of being put on the market. Some properties don't even hit the market. The ones that are taking sort of 3 to 6 months, I would say are overpriced, especially in this heated market. But 3 to 6 months in a normal market is quite normal and not unusual for properties to take that long to sell. Now, when I say that we take that long for the property to sell, that means that the purchaser as well as the seller both have to be acting on their own accord. So that is, it's not a mortgagee in possession. The purchaser doesn't have to buy that property because they might have a sick family member or things like that. It's not a divorce. It's two independent parties working of their own accord to purchase or sell a property. Now, when we do go and value these properties, I sort of use 5 units of comparison, and that is the main one is the location. So for those in Shepparton, if you've got a property in Maud Street, Orr Street, Corio, somewhere around there, Sutherland Avenue, location is sort of second to none. You've then got sort of outer locations all the way through to some areas which are a lot less desirable, and that might be in areas sort of around Olympic Avenue, things like that, where there's a high proportion of rented properties rather than owner occupied. So yeah, location is a very, very big one because you can have almost identical properties, but two separate locations, and they can come in very, very different valuation figures. So location, the second one is land size. So a small block of land versus a large block of land. We don't really look too much if the block of land is subdividable on a general daily basis. Only if that property would only be purchased by a developer do we then look at it and say, well, okay, it's development potential, so therefore let's look at its long-term development potential. But if it's got a relatively good house on a 900 or 1,000 square meter block, we would just value it as a single house on a 1,000 square meter block and not look at it for 2 or 3 units down the track. So, like I said, location, land size, improvements. Improvements are a big one, and that is what's on the property. Is it a 1960s weatherboard house? Is it a brand new custom built home? Uh, these things here are at the moment they're the things that people look at. That's what people are buying, and that's what's tugging on people's heartstrings. So obviously, newer is typically always better, other than if you've got a period home that has those real period features like the high ceilings, the decorative cornices, ceiling roses. Items like that really have some value, even though they're old. They've got some real character appeal, and they do help push property prices right up. Um, we also look at the ancillary improvements, which are pools, sheds, pergolas, landscaping. Those items are sort of the icing on the cake. And for instance, a pool costs about $60,000 at the moment to put one in around Shepparton. They add about 30. They're starting to add a little bit more than that, but you don't sort of get your dollar for dollar that you would normally get with other items. Same as sheds. Sheds are typically a bit less than dollar for dollar, and your landscaping is a funny one. Juvenile landscaping with small plants that you would buy from Bunnings isn't overly desirable because anyone can do that. Whereas you go into some of these places that are 10, 15, 20 years old and they've got beautiful tall trees, established hedges, nice flowers, beautiful lawns. That really adds some value, and people can look at it and go, yep, this is what I want. I want the kids to grow up here, kick the footy out the back, chuck another shrimp on the barbie and have a beer sort of thing. And lastly, the condition of the home. So it might be a newer home, but it might also be shagged, really well worn. Whereas it could be an older home, so a 20-year-old home that's been really well looked after, and that there might be worth more based on condition than a house that's 10 years newer. So they're sort of the five things. So to go over them again: location, land size, size of the home, the quality of the improvements, the condition, and also the ancillary improvements. Now, when we value properties, settled comparable sales. So what that means is, today a real estate agent may sell a property and it may go for, let's say, 500,000, and your house is around the corner, and you think my house is the same as that. So that property has to settle, which means it has to go through a finance period for the purchasers to get finance approval. It then needs to go through to settlement, which could be 30, 60, 90 days. Then once the purchasers have effectively moved into the property, that is then called a settled sale. So because we have to use settled sales when valuing a property, and that's required by law, that's not a bank rule, that's not a valuer's rule, anything like that, that's actually required by law. Because it's settled sales, we're using properties that are 3 months old, 4 months old, 5 months old. Now, if you've been following my stuff for a little while, the market is trending up quite rapidly. Because of that, your property may sit here if you go to sell it, but with the settled sales, we're looking back here. So we are actually behind the market, and there's no secrets about that. Valuers will always be behind the market because of that settled sales. Now, to sort of help a valuer when he does come to, or she, say he, being myself, but or she comes to value your home, you can let them know of some sales that have happened recently in the area. Now, if you can give them some good, solid evidence, and that is, number 12 Smith Street around the corner sold, it's same number of bedrooms, same number of bathrooms, it's built about the same time as mine, but it might have a slightly bigger pergola than mine and it sold for 500. Well, then the valuer can use that information, because unless we actually go and see that property because we've been asked to do it for the sale, we don't know about it. Now, I'm one of half a dozen to 10 valuers in Shepparton. I don't know what the other guys are doing and girls. Conversely, they don't know the ones that I'm doing. So we sort of are fighting with one hand tied behind our back. So if you're able to supply some sales evidence to us when we come and do the valuation inspection,
that will help you. Now, our valuations come under quite a bit of scrutiny, and that is because the banks are lending money on it. And that's why we've actually got to be quite highly educated and trained, because we are dealing with other people's money. You can go to a mate's house and go, oh, yeah, it's worth $1 million. But if it's not, and things decide to go sideways, then it's my name on the report, or any other valuer's name on the report, and we actually can be prosecuted and sued for malpractice, a whole raft of things. So it's just not worth it. But there is quite a bit of stringency around it. And then there are, for bank valuations, there are 3 different types of valuations that a bank can order. One of them is a full inspection, and that is where the valuer will come to your house, they will measure it up around the outside, they'll go through it, take the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, lounge rooms, quality of the home. They'll go through a full walkthrough that can take anywhere up to sort of half an hour, and then they'll go away, write the report, and compile it. And that report's about 10 pages long. We send that off to the bank, and happy days. The other type that they'll order is called a curbside, which we don't get out of the car. We drive past your house, we take a photo of the front, take a few notes, basically looking at what it looks like from the street and having a guess. And we actually put a price range on that valuation rather than a set figure. And that is because we haven't seen inside the house. Now, if you've got a house that has some really good curb appeal, beautiful gardens and freshly painted out the front, and you get a curbside valuation, it will probably be higher than a full valuation if you haven't done the internals. And that's because we're judging a book by its cover, unfortunately, or fortunately for you, whichever way you want to play it. The other one that the banks will order is called a desktop. Now, desktops are becoming more and more popular, and that is because a bank can order it in the morning and get it back by the afternoon. Now, a desktop literally pops up on my computer that I've got a desktop to do. The bank gives me all the information, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. I can see some photos from when it was last sold or Google Street View and make a judgment based on that. Now, it's a judgment. Again, it's very low. It's low confidence in the sense that banks will only order a desktop valuation if there's a fair bit of equity on the owner's part there. So it might be a 60% loan to value ratio or a 50%. So therefore, if we say that the house is worth $500,000, you would have probably $150,000 worth of equity in it. And therefore they would only need to sell it for $350,000 to make their money back on the $500,000 home. So it's just something to be aware, but they are becoming more and more prevalent. And like I said, banks love them because they can get them in, get the job done, get it out, and basically give you an approval within the day. So for those that have just joined us, we're talking about valuations. I've just gone through bank valuations. I'll now talk about council rating valuations. So with the council, they do drive-bys only. They used to do it every 2 years. Now I believe they have to do it every 12 months. And like I was saying before, with a curbside is great if the front of your house looks fantastic and you want a high valuation. If the front of your house doesn't look great but the inside's brilliant, not so good if you want a high valuation. In the sense of a council rating valuation, you want the lowest possible, because at the end of the day, the higher the valuation is on the council rates, and that is the CIV or the capital improved value, the more rates you pay. Now, that means that a property that's got a capital improved value on the council rates of $1 million will be paying far more rates than a property that has a valuation of $200,000. That's the way things work. Now, that's why if you're only worried about council rating valuations, you want the front of your house to look like a bomb site, to be honest. The front of your house doesn't look great, therefore, when they drive past, it doesn't look as good. They put a lower value on it, you pay less rates. But then if you go and get a bank valuation the next day and we see that same front yard looking like a bomb site, it also hurts your bank valuation. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. So your council valuations are typically the lowest of the three valuations I'll talk about tonight, and they're just used as a very rough price guide. So in Victoria, you've got a Section 32 statement, which is a vendor statement. In there, you'll have a copy of the rates notice. Pre-auction, have a look at it. You can have a look at what the council rates the property as. It is not the be-all and end-all. It is just a guideline. And if the council rates are showing that the property is worth 250 and it's on the market for 700, something's not right. Maybe that the rates are done on vacant land only, and they've just built a home and now they're selling it. That can happen. Something might not be right. Property may have been subdivided. The council rates may actually be incorrect. So you want it to be close as a guideline, but they can always be out. So don't use it as the be-all and end-all. And the other thing I get a lot when I go and do a valuation is people say, well, I don't want a high valuation because I don't want the I don't want the council to get a hold of it and then put my rates up. The council don't get access to our valuations that we send to the bank. The bank is the only one that gets that information, as well as your broker. Sometimes the broker doesn't even get it. They will just get notification from the bank to say, all good to go, your finance is approved. So don't be worried about getting a really strong bank valuation and then having your council rates go up. It doesn't happen like that. So the third one that I'll talk about tonight are agents. So with a real estate agent, it's not actually a valuation. It's an appraisal. It's an indicative selling price or a guideline of market value. So with an agent, they will have to do a pseudo valuation, and that is they'll have to do it used to be called an estimate of selling price form. It's now called a statement of information form. On that, they'll say what they believe the property is worth between X and Y, and 3 sales within 18 months, and I think it's within 5 kilometres of the subject property. Whereas with bank valuers, they ideally want our sales to be within 3 to 6 months of the current date, and then as close as possible physically. So therefore, the agents actually get quite a bit more leeway, enabled to get their sales data. So that does help. That estimate of selling price form or statement of information form is actually a good guideline to see whether the property that you're buying is in line with what the rest of the market is, which is fantastic. That was brought about because of the underquoting laws that were happening in Melbourne, where people would rock up to an auction and the agent would tell the people that the property would be sold for around the 800, and then the opening bid's 950,000. Blows it straight out of the water from the get-go. So you can actually get that copy of statement of information. You can have a look at it on realestate.com, or if you're looking at a property, call the agent and ask to have a look at it. It does help if you're unfamiliar with the area as to what other properties have sold in the area. Now, an agent's appraisal will always be higher than a bank valuation, and that is because as the market's going up like this, the agent wants to anticipate where your property will sell for when it comes on the market. Now, they want to hit up here because then once you negotiate down and you hit where the market is, rather than if they say it's here, then someone negotiates you down, you're back here. The reason you want a bit of leeway is because I don't think anyone's gone and bought a brand new car or anything off Facebook Marketplace or anything and hasn't tried to haggle. You don't want to necessarily pay the list price. We always want to get a bit of a discount, and you build in a bit of that discount when you when the agents go to list the property. So if the property is listed for 400,000, it might sell for 395, it might sell for 390. I've seen some properties that have sold for 405 because they've had 2 or 3 people on them and they've gone for a bit of a silent auction, and it's a bit of FOMO, fear of missing out, and a bit of a win at all cost mentality, and it goes for over the agent's asking, which is fine. The agent's done his job or her job well then, because they've created that sense of demand and they've got the best outcome for their client. Now, the agent works for the seller. There's no, people sort of think that the agent works for the buyer. No, the agent is paid by the seller, so therefore they are working for the seller. So, like I said, they are wanting to anticipate the market. So, an agent's appraisal will always be higher than a bank valuation, and that's not because they want to necessarily buy your business or buy the listing, but they want to anticipate the market and make sure that you, as the seller, get the highest possible price. Well, that will wrap it up for tonight, unless there's anyone that's got any comments or anything like that you want me to cover. But outside of that, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. I hope you've got some value, pardon the pun, but gotten some value out of tonight. If you have, please share the video around, or let other people know that may be interested in property, so I can help educate them as well. Because money is not necessarily a finite resource. There's plenty of it to go around, and if we can all sort of help each other make a bit of money, especially through property, then we'll all make each other's lives better. But anyway, thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.